Welcome back to Horror History, where we uncover the most chilling stories from the past. Now, I know that in the last one I said I'd see you next week, but I just can't help myself and had to read another story. So, in today's episode, we delve into one of America's most haunting unsolved crimes, the Villisca Axe Murders. On a warm summer night in 1912, in the quiet town of Villisca, Iowa, a brutal crime shocked the nation. An entire family, along with 2 houseguests, never caught, leaving a dark stain on the town's history. Join me as we explore the details of this gruesome crime, the eerie aftermath, and the many theories surrounding one of the most perplexing unsolved murders in American history. Let's set the stage. The year is 1912. Villisca, Iowa was a small, tight-knit community with a population of about 2,000 people. The town was peaceful, a far cry from the bustling urban centers of the time. The Moore family lived in a modest but well-kept home on 2nd Street, right in the heart of the town. The family consisted of Josiah Moore, a respected local businessman, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children, Herman, Mary, Arthur, and Paul. That summer, the Moore family had invited 2 friends, Lena and Ina Stillinger, to stay the night. Lena and Ina were 2 young girls, ages 12 and 8, respectively, and were friends of the Moore children. They had planned to spend the night, and everything seemed normal at first, but what happened next would send shockwaves through the small community, leaving a trail of mystery and fear that has never fully dissipated. On the night of June 9th, 1912, the Moore family and the 2 girls were all asleep in their beds when tragedy struck. The murderer, armed with an axe, crept into the house and brutally murdered each of them while they slept. Silent, swift, and terrifying. This would become one of the most infamous axe murders in American history. The crime itself was horrific in its brutality and precision. The killer used an axe that belonged to the Moore family, and there's no doubt the murders were premeditated. The victims were bludgeoned in their sleep, struck with such force that it's believed that they didn't even have time to react. The blows were concentrated on their heads, with each victim being struck multiple times. The Moore parents, Josiah and Sarah, were found in their room, both beaten beyond recognition. Their faces were so severely damaged that identifying them was nearly impossible at first. The children, Herman, Mary, Arthur, and Paul, were also found in their respective beds, their faces destroyed by the same brutal weapon. Even the 2 young girls, Lena and Ina, were not spared. They were found in a separate bed in the guest room, and like the others, they too had been struck multiple times with the axe. The killer's method was disturbingly methodical. After the murders, the axe was cleaned and placed back in the same spot where it had been taken from. The killer then covered the victims with sheets, hiding this horrific scene. But that wasn't all. A shocking detail emerged the following morning, when the house was discovered. All the mirrors in the house were covered, which some investigators later speculated could be symbolic of part of the killer's ritual. The killer's strange behavior didn't end there. After committing the murders, they took the time to close the curtains, feed the family's dog, and even prepare a meal. It was as though the murderer had no fear of being caught, as if they had all the time in the world. The eerie part of this crime is that it was carried out so silently. The neighbors heard nothing, no screams, no sounds of struggle, no warning signs. The killer struck with such deadly efficiency that even the family's dog didn't make a sound. It's a level of calm that defies logic, and after it was all over, the killer seemingly vanished into thin air. The next morning, when the Moore family didn't show up for church, concern grew among the neighbors. They sent someone to check on the family, and it was there, in that quiet house, that the unspeakable truth was discovered. The police were called immediately, and an investigation began. Despite a thorough investigation, there were very few clues left behind. There were no signs of forced entry, which suggested that the killer may have known the victims and had access to the home. The police were baffled, no one heard anything, and there was no immediate evidence pointing to any suspect. One of the most chilling aspects of the investigation was the lack of a clear motive. There was no sign of robbery, no evidence that the killer had taken anything of value. The axe that was used was found in the house, and nothing was missing. The killer had committed this brutal act without taking anything, leaving only the carnage behind. This absence of a motive made the case even more mysterious and unsettling. Several suspects were named during the investigation, but none were ever charged. One of the most notable suspects was a man named Frank Jones, a local businessman who had been in a long-standing feud with Josiah Moore. There were rumors that Jones had been upset by Moore's success, and some believed that this rivalry could have led to the murders. However, there was no concrete evidence to link Jones to the crime, and he was eventually ruled out as a suspect. Another potential suspect was a man named Andrew Sawyer, who was said to have been in town around the time of the murders. Sawyer was a traveling salesman with a history of violent behavior, but again, there was no direct evidence that tied him to the crime scene. Even though several people came forward claiming to have seen Sawyer in the area, the case continued to remain cold. The police also explored the possibility that the killer might have been a stranger passing through Villisca, but the lack of any real leads and the seemingly random nature of the crime made it difficult for the authorities to find any meaningful answers. The case would go on to remain unsolved, despite numerous attempts by local law enforcement and even private investigators. Over the years, many theories have emerged to explain what happened that night. Some believe the killer was someone who had known the family, someone who was familiar with the house and its routines. This theory is supported by the fact that the killer didn't need to break in. Everything about the crime suggests the murderer had some level of access and familiarity with the Moore family's lifestyle. One of the more intriguing theories is the killer might have been a deranged individual with a personal connection to the family. Some believe the killer was driven by jealousy or rage, possibly stemming from a long-standing grudge. Others think the killer may have been someone who had been stalking the family for months, planning the murders meticulously. Then there's a theory that the crime was committed by someone who was only passing through the town. The fact that the killer left with nothing suggests a certain randomness to the crime. Could the murder have been the result of a fleeting moment of rage or opportunity? Perhaps the killer saw an open window of opportunity and in the dead of night decided to strike. Another theory that has been proposed is that there were multiple killers involved. Some suggest that it may have been a gang or group of individuals who carried out the murders together. The eerie calmness of the crime, how the killers didn't rush, how they took their time, might suggest there was more than one person involved. The idea of a group of killers, each playing a role in the grisly scene, sends a shiver down your spine. Some modern-day theories even point to the possibility that the murders were connected to occult rituals, or some sort of religious belief. The fact that the mirrors were covered, the curtains drawn, and the unusual realistic behavior of the killer has led some to speculate that it wasn't just a simple murder, but a sacrifice, or a ritualistic killing. However, there is no concrete evidence to support this theory, and it remains largely speculative. Despite numerous theories and extensive investigation, the Villisca Axe Murders remain one of the most puzzling and terrifying unsolved cases in American history. The town of Villisca, once a peaceful rural community, became a place marked by fear and suspicion. The Moore family deaths have haunted the town for over a century, and the unanswered questions continue to echo through the years. Today, the house where the murders took place still stands, though it is now a museum and a site for paranormal investigators. Some claim that the spirits of the victims still linger in the house, their souls forever tied to the brutal murders they suffered. The house remains a chilling reminder of the unsolved crime that still haunts Villisca to this day. Many questions remain unanswered. Who was the killer? Why did they choose this particular family? Was it a random act of violence, or was there something more to this story? For over a century, people have speculated, investigated, and theorized about what happened that night, but the truth remains elusive. That's it for today's episode of Horror History. The Villisca Axe Murders left behind more questions than answers, and the haunting mystery continues to grip the hearts of those who study it. If you're fascinated by this case, be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more chilling stories from history's darkest corners. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and as always, stay safe. Peace.